I always relied very heavily in my life on my common sense versus my intellect. And, so to me, everything in life is like, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Really good rule of thumb. I found that serves really, really well.
You get brought in and everyone I think that's so important, because now I'm thinking back through like all the things. And I would say that is the biggest learning I've had, is really like being able to like see through to like the truth.
If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense.
Even if it makes sense in that moment, sometimes you need to go back and like really think through like, okay, that sounded good, but what do I really know? Because when you do that, usually you're like, wait, I really know XYZ. So that now I know that doesn't make sense. Because in the moment, like you said, it does make sense when they're telling the story and they're saying things. You're like, oh yeah, I get it. And then you're like, hold up. What about all this other information that I already know to be true? So I think that's really important, that sometimes that external locus of control is not always super obvious. Like sometimes you have to like suss it out a little bit, because it's just a little bit under the surface.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, for everyone that's listening to the show today, it's really trusting yourself at a higher level. When you hear something that conflicts with what you know to be true, whether it's, in a different context or not, it's like, no, no, you know what I mean? Like, it's so interesting, because when I was interviewing and I worked in staffing and recruiting, people would always say, oh, I got laid off. The company was doing layoffs. And so I would always ask like, well, how many people got laid off and in what department? And how many people are still left? And what number were you? And where did you rank? And very simply and very quickly, I learned that when you unravel that onion, those layoffs were not layoffs. Those layoffs were them cutting the people that weren't performing. And those layoffs were many times them simply pruning. They were pruning the organization. Just like, if someone's not with us anymore, they're not with us anymore for a reason, because their performance did not match up with the performance of the organization. And we're not going to carry weight that isn't going to add up. And I know it's a tough conversation. Now, that said, obviously, in this economy, we have people being laid off like 1,000 at a time, 500 at a time, 300 at a time. So there's a lot of people that actually are being like swept out with full department changes and full company changes. And I fully acknowledge that. But just to the stories, I think for business owners, a lot of times you don't trust yourself fully, and you don't trust those little pings of like your own awareness that come up. And I think learning to trust yourself and learning to not just like tuck those things like under the rug, but instead to really listen to that is huge. And just, I feel that the number one thing that holds people back from building like self-led organizations is twofold. Number one, you will hire the wrong people doing this. I promise you, you will hire the wrong people. It will cost you a lot of money. It will be extremely frustrating. You will say, I lost a year of my life. That is the toll. That is the price that you will pay for freedom. And if you are not willing to pay that price of the trial and error that comes with this process, then you don't deserve to get to the other side, and you're never going to. You're never going to. And I see so many people, and Danielle, you know this because you've been in the business, you've been in the trenches with me. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I see so many people that are like, I'm burnout. I'm doing everything. I have a team, but my hands are still in everything, right? They don't have leadership. They don't have vice presidents. They don't have managers. They don't have, directors. And it's like, how many attempts have you made? And if you aren't willing to understand and have a long range vision for your organization with the understanding that you are going to make mistakes in this process. The first 4 executives that I hired are all gone. They're all gone. They were completely wrong for our organization. And I had to go through that process. And you know what? I remember telling the team and having a conversation back it's 2 years ago now that I started this process. 2 full years ago now that I started this process. And I said, like, this is going to take, I said between 1 and 3 years to build out this executive team. And I knew, and it is so painful and it is so expensive. I knew I was going to make mistakes, but there's no way around it. I used a professional sourcing firm. I paid fees. I did deep dive, experiences. But part of that is the learning curve for you. Part of it is the evolution of the company. Part of it is even getting clear on who you really need and what you really need for the roles. Like, there's so many dynamics that go into that. But what I would say is that you can't skip over that process and have the freedom that comes with it. Most people are not willing to go through the pain so that they can feel the pleasure. And guess what? That's just a microcosm of life. That is a microcosm of life. So, I hired 4 very incorrect executives for our company before I got the right ones in place. And now we have just some incredible human beings, not just Danielle and Crystal. I'm talking about Danielle and Crystal and our vice president team and the layer of people behind them that are, working their way up. But that didn't happen by chance. And that did not happen quickly. And that did not happen easily. And that did not happen without costing me a lot of money. And that did not happen without a lot of painful mistakes along the way. But now, sitting where we are today, if you said, well, was it worth it? I would be like, hell yeah. Would you do it again? Hell yeah. I would be smarter. I'd approach it differently, but absolutely. Yeah.